My name is Velma, 58 years old, and I never expected that an ordinary dinner invitation would reopen the wound of losing my husband Robert. He passed away from heart failure 2 years ago, leaving a void no one could fill. When my son Jackson called to invite me to dinner at his new house, I was thrilled. But walking into his dining room, I froze. There was a place set for Robert, complete with his favorite crystal glass. If you've ever felt a loved one's presence after they're gone, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. My story might explain what you've felt. Robert and I met during our sophomore year at Portland State University. I was studying literature while he pursued architecture. We quite literally bumped into each other at the library. I dropped my stack of poetry books, and he helped gather them, suggesting coffee afterward. That coffee date turned into 35 wonderful years of marriage. We built our life in Portland, a modest two-story craftsman house that Robert partially designed himself. We raised our two children there, Jackson, our firstborn, and Amanda, who came along 3 years later. Robert was the anchor of our family, his steady presence guiding us through life's storms with calm wisdom. His career as an architect flourished. Robert specialized in residential projects, creating homes that reflected the families who would live in them. He could listen to people describe their dreams and translate those words into spaces where those dreams could unfold. Jackson idolized him, following him around job sites from the time he could walk. The day Robert died remains burned into my memory. It was a Tuesday in October, unusually sunny for Portland. He had complained of indigestion that morning, but insisted on going to work. At 3:15, I got the call from the hospital. Massive heart attack while presenting designs to clients. By the time I arrived, he was gone, just 60 years old. The funeral passed in a blur of black clothes and casseroles. Friends and family filled our home sharing stories about Robert that made us laugh through tears. But when everyone left, the silence was deafening. His reading glasses still on the nightstand, his slippers by the bed, the half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. Every corner of our home echoed his absence. Jackson took it hardest. At 32, he had just started finding his footing in his banking career. Robert had been his sounding board, his mentor. At the funeral, Jackson stood rigid, accepting condolences with a tight nod, but hardly speaking. When I reached for his hand during the service, it felt cold and unresponsive. Amanda, ever practical even in grief, flew back to Chicago a week after the funeral. Her marketing job demanded her return. She called regularly, but visits became increasingly rare. She handled her grief by throwing herself into work, a trait she inherited from her father. I rattled around our family home alone, surrounded by memories that both comforted and tortured me. 35 years of shared life left traces everywhere. The height marks on the kitchen door frame charting our children's growth, the small crack in the bathroom tile from when Robert dropped his razor, the garden bench where we had our morning coffee. Grief counseling helped somewhat. The therapist explained the stages I might experience, but knowing them intellectually didn't ease the actual journey through them. The support group at the community center provided some solace. Other widows and widowers who understood the peculiar loneliness of sleeping on your side of a bed that suddenly seems enormous. 6 months after the funeral, I finally gathered the courage to pack Robert's clothes. Each item carried a memory. The blue sweater he wore on our last anniversary dinner. The threadbare Oregon Ducks t-shirt. He refused to throw away the suit he had custom-made for Jackson's college graduation. Amanda offered to help during one of her brief visits, but this felt like something I needed to do alone. His scent lingered in the closet, and I found myself sitting on the floor, holding his favorite jacket to my face, trying to capture whatever essence of him remained. I discovered small treasures in his pockets. A movie ticket stub from our last date night, a receipt with a doodle of our house, a handwritten note reminding himself to order flowers for my birthday. The dream started around this time. Vivid encounters where Robert appeared as healthy and vital as ever. Sometimes he would simply sit beside me, not speaking but present. Other times he had urgent messages that dissolved upon waking. I would reach for him in the dim morning light, my heart breaking anew, when my hands found only empty sheets. Meanwhile, Jackson became increasingly distant. Our Sunday dinners, a tradition Robert had insisted upon, stopped entirely. My calls went to voicemail. My texts received brief, non-committal responses. I understood grief affected everyone differently, but his absence left another hole in my already fractured heart. As the first anniversary of Robert's death approached, I realized I needed to make active choices about my future. The grief would always be there, but I could build a life around it rather than letting it consume me. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. Robert had always encouraged my artistic interests, though I had set them aside during our busy years of raising children and supporting his career. The feel of the brush in my hand, the way colors bloomed on paper, it gave me moments of peace and sometimes even joy. The library 2 blocks from our home had a part-time position open. 3 days a week I surrounded myself with books and gentle conversation. The routine gave structure to my days, and the walk to and from work became a form of meditation. New friends entered my life: Maria from the watercolor class, whose husband had died of cancer 5 years earlier; Daphne, the retired English teacher, who worked at the library; Tom, the widower from grief group, who asked me to coffee with no romantic intentions, just a desire for companionship. These relationships, while not replacing what I had lost, created a new fabric of support. But Jackson's continued absence worried me deeply. The few times I saw him, he appeared thinner, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. When I mentioned Robert, he would abruptly change the subject or find a reason to end our meeting. 6 months into my second year of widowhood, Jackson stunned me with the news that he had left his banking position to pursue real estate. Dad always said I had an eye for property potential, he said during one of our rare phone conversations, the first time he had voluntarily mentioned his father in months. 2 weeks later, through our family friend Patrice, I learned Jackson had purchased an old house across town. The news stung, such a major life decision, and he hadn't even told me himself. When I called to congratulate him, his response was lukewarm at best. "It's just a project, Mom, nothing to get excited about." The mysterious woman in Jackson's life came to my attention through similar second-hand channels. Patrice mentioned seeing Jackson with a lovely dark-haired woman at the farmer's market. They were picking out paint samples, she reported. Seemed quite cozy. My attempts to learn more met with Jackson's trademark deflection. "Just someone I'm seeing. It's not serious." The dismissal hurt more than he knew. Robert would have been disappointed by his son's behavior. We had raised our children to value family connections, to share their lives with us. Now, in my time of greatest need, my son had emotionally disappeared. I confided my concerns to Amanda during her brief Christmas visit. She dismissed them with a wave. "That's just Jackson processing, Mom. You know how he is, he goes inward. Remember when his high school girlfriend broke up with him? We didn't hear a word for weeks, then suddenly he was fine." But this wasn't a teenage breakup. This was his father's death. And 18 months of minimal contact seemed excessive even for Jackson's introversion. The holidays passed with Jackson making only a brief appearance on Christmas Day, arriving late and leaving early, offering no details about his life or his mysterious renovation project. On the second anniversary of Robert's death, I visited the cemetery alone. Amanda sent flowers from Chicago. Jackson didn't call. I sat beside the grave, telling Robert about my watercolor progress, about the book club I had joined, about my worry for our son. A light rain began to fall, matching the tears on my face. "I'm trying, Robert," I whispered, "but I don't know how to reach him." That evening, alone in the house, that now felt too large and too empty, I considered the possibility of selling. Perhaps a fresh start somewhere smaller would help. I fell asleep on the couch with Robert's photo in my hands, wondering what advice he would give, if he could. The call came 3 days after the anniversary. Jackson's number lighting up my phone screen nearly made me drop my coffee mug. I answered with perhaps too much enthusiasm. Mom. His voice sounded different, softer, almost nervous. I was wondering if you might be free for dinner this Friday at my house. The renovation is finally finished enough to have guests. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, wondering if I had misheard. Your house? You want me to come to dinner? Yes. He hesitated. Around 7 I could text you the address. And Mom, there's someone I'd like you to meet. The mysterious girlfriend, I presumed. My heart lifted at the small crack in the wall Jackson had built. I'll be there. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, he said, then added awkwardly. It'll be nice to see you, Mom. I spent the next 2 days in a flutter of anticipation and anxiety. I bought a bottle of good Cabernet. Robert had taught both our children to appreciate wine. I had my hair trimmed. I wore the blue dress Robert had always liked, with his mother's pearl necklace. The drive to Jackson's house took me through an unfamiliar neighborhood of older homes with character, exactly the kind of properties Robert had loved. When I pulled up to the address Jackson had sent, I sat in the car for a moment, taking in the sight. It was a 1920s craftsman similar in style to our family home but smaller. The fresh paint and new landscaping showed recent care, but the bones of the place were clearly vintage. Jackson opened the door before I could knock. He looked better than he had in months. Some weight back on his frame, a healthier color in his face. He hugged me awkwardly, taking the wine with a genuine smile. Come in, Mom. There's someone I want you to meet. She stood in the hallway, a slender woman about Jackson's age with dark curly hair and warm brown eyes. Her smile seemed tentative but genuine. Mom, this is Nora. Nora, my mother, Velma. It's so nice to finally meet you, Nora said, extending her hand. Jackson talks about you all the time. I raised an eyebrow at this, given my son's recent reticence, but accepted her handshake. Lovely to meet you too, Nora. I've heard, actually, very little about you. Jackson had the good grace to look embarrassed. Let me show you around before dinner's ready. The tour revealed careful, loving restoration work. Original hardwood floors had been sanded and refinished. Built-in cabinets gleamed with fresh polish. The kitchen had been updated with modern appliances that somehow didn't clash with the vintage feel of the space. This molding looks exactly like what we have at home, I commented, running my fingers along the craftsman-style woodwork. Jackson nodded. I noticed that too. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely, but he had already moved on, pointing out the new windows he had installed. In the small study off the living room, I spotted a familiar red toolbox. Are those your father's tools? Jackson's hand brushed the box almost reverentially. Yeah, seemed right to use them for this. Dad taught me everything I know about restoration. He would be proud of what you've done here, I said softly. A shadow crossed Jackson's face. Dinner should be about ready. This way. He led me to the dining room, a charming space with a bay window overlooking the backyard. The table was beautifully set for four with candles and a centerpiece of fresh flowers. I stopped abruptly, my heart stuttering in my chest. 4 place settings, 1 at each end of the table and 2 along the sides. And at one of those side positions, the crystal glass, Robert's crystal glass, the one from the set his parents had given us as a wedding present. The one he had always insisted on using for special occasions. Jackson. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Why are there 4 places? My son's face drained of color. He looked from the table to me, then to Nora, who had entered behind us. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. Mom. Jackson said, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you about this house. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the soft ticking of a wall clock, a sound so reminiscent of the one in our family home that it momentarily distracted me. Jackson pulled out a chair, gesturing for me to sit, My legs felt suddenly unsteady, so I complied. Nora quietly slipped into the kitchen, giving us privacy. 2 years ago, just before Dad died, Jackson began, his voice low. He bought this house. I found the paperwork when I was helping you organize his office after the funeral. My head spun with this information. Robert bought a house without telling me. Jackson nodded slowly. It was meant to be a surprise. For your 35th wedding anniversary. He was planning to renovate it as a retirement home for you both. Smaller, less maintenance, but with all the character you both loved. The air seemed to leave my lungs in a rush. Our 35th anniversary would have been 6 months after Robert died. He had been planning a future he would never see. There was a folder, Jackson continued, with sketches in Dad's hand, design ideas, notes about what to keep, what to update. It was a complete vision for this place. And you never told me? The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. Jackson's eyes dropped to the table. At first I couldn't. It hurt too much. Then I had this idea. I would complete Dad's project. Do exactly what he had planned. It became a way to still work with him in a way. Nora returned with a bottle of water and glasses, setting them on the table, without interrupting. I took a long drink, trying to process what I was hearing. I met Nora at a salvage yard, Jackson continued. She's an interior designer who specializes in period-appropriate renovations. When I told her about Dad's plans, she offered to help. We've been working on it for over a year now, Nora added softly. Jackson wanted everything perfect before showing you the place setting. I said, my eyes drawn back to Robert's crystal glass. Why is that there? Jackson and Nora exchanged a glance that contained an entire conversation. Finally, Jackson spoke. Because Dad is here, Mom, not just in the plans or the work we've done. He's actually here. I stared at my son, wondering if grief had affected his mind more severely than I'd realized. I started sleeping here about 6 months into the renovation, Jackson said, even though it was still a construction zone, and things would happen. Tools that I had put away would be in different places in the morning. Lights I was sure I had turned off would be on. Old houses settle, I said automatically. Wiring can be unreliable. I thought so too at first, Nora interjected. I'm pretty skeptical about that kind of thing, but then I started experiencing it too. The smell of pipe tobacco would appear suddenly in rooms where no one had been smoking. Dad's pipe, Jackson said. The one he only smoked on special occasions. I remembered it well. The cherry wood pipe that had belonged to Robert's grandfather. The tobacco had a distinctive sweet scent. Sometimes I'd hear humming. Jackson continued. Dad's humming. You know how he always hummed when he was working? That same tune from that old western he loved. Red River Valley, I whispered. Robert's favorite song, one his mother had sung to him as a child. Exactly. Jackson nodded eagerly. And I'd find notes in his handwriting with suggestions for the renovation. Notes I'm absolutely certain weren't there before. The room felt suddenly cold, despite the warm spring evening. Why didn't you tell me any of this? For over a year, Jackson, you've been here supposedly experiencing your father's presence, and you never once thought to include me. The hurt I'd been carrying for months crystallized into anger. While I had been drowning in loneliness, my son had been secretly fostering a connection to Robert that he deliberately kept from me. How could you be so selfish? The words escaped before I could stop them. I've been alone, Jackson, trying to rebuild my life without your father, without you too, since you've barely spoken to me. And all this time you've been here with him in some way, and you kept it from me. Jackson flinched as if I'd slapped him. I couldn't bear to see you hurting, Mom. Every time I looked at you, I saw your pain, and it made my own worse. And I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you wouldn't believe me, that you'd think I was losing my mind. Or worse, that you'd believe me but Dad wouldn't manifest or whatever this is when you were here. And that would hurt you even more. My anger deflated slightly in the face of his obvious distress. Nora touched his arm gently in support. There's more, Jackson said after collecting himself. Dad left a letter for you about this house. I've been keeping it until the renovation was finished, the way he would have wanted. You kept a letter my husband wrote to me. The anger flared again. What gave you that right? I know it was wrong, Jackson admitted. But the letter specifically mentioned presenting the house to you when it was done the way he had planned to. I thought I was honoring his wishes. Nora quietly excused herself to check on dinner, clearly wanting to give us space. Where is this letter? I demanded. And what else of Robert's have you kept from me? Jackson left the room and returned with a wooden box I recognized from Robert's office. Inside were blueprints, sketches, material samples, a complete documentation of his vision for this house. And beneath it all, an envelope with my name written in my husband's distinctive architect's handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The letter inside was dated just 2 weeks before Robert's death. My dearest Velma, it began. If you're reading this, then our son has completed the project I began. This house is my gift to you, to us, for the next chapter of our lives together. The letter continued detailing his hopes for our retirement years in this smaller, more manageable home. But one paragraph stopped my breath. My doctor has advised me that my heart isn't what it should be. Nothing to worry about immediately, but a reminder that our time isn't infinite. I haven't told you because I don't want you to worry, and the medication seems to be helping. By the time you read this letter, either I'll have surprised you with this house for our anniversary, or circumstances will have changed our plans. Either way, know that every detail of this home was chosen with you in mind, with love in every decision. I looked up at Jackson, tears blurring my vision. He knew he was sick, and he didn't tell me. Jackson nodded slowly. There was more medical information in the files. He had been diagnosed with cardiomyopathy about 6 months before he died. The doctors had warned him that even with medication his condition could deteriorate suddenly. The revelation was like a physical blow. All those months when Robert complained of fatigue, when he begged off our evening walks claiming work stress, he had been protecting me from the truth, making plans for a future he suspected he might not see, and keeping it all secret. Why wouldn't he tell me? I whispered more to myself than to Jackson. We could have faced it together. We could have had more time, been more careful, done more research. He didn't want to worry you, Jackson said softly. That's what the cardiologist told me when I contacted him after finding the records. Dad told the doctor he wanted to handle things his way on his terms. You're just like Robert, always trying to shield me to fix problems before I knew they existed. But this wasn't a leaky faucet or a career setback. This was his life, our life together. I feel like I've lost him all over again. I said, the letter trembling in my hands. First to death and now to these secrets. Dinner was a subdued affair. Nora had prepared a lovely meal, roast chicken with herbs, Robert's favorite. But I merely pushed the food around my plate. The empty chair and place setting across from me felt like both a comfort and an accusation. He would have loved this house, I said, finally breaking the silence. The original woodwork, the garden potential. Jackson nodded eagerly. There's a space in the backyard perfect for your roses. Dad marked it specifically in his plans. Velma's rose garden with southern exposure. A cold draft suddenly swept through the dining room, making the candles flicker wildly, though all the windows were closed. Nora and Jackson exchanged one of their knowing glances. That happens sometimes, Nora said softly, usually when we mention specific details from Robert's plans. As if to punctuate her statement, the crystal glass at the empty place setting moved slightly, rotating about a quarter turn on the tablecloth. I gasped, my hand flying to my throat. Are you doing that? I demanded, looking between them. Is this some kind of elaborate prank? No, Mom, Jackson said solemnly. This is what I've been trying to tell you. Dad is here somehow. Not all the time, but enough that it can't be coincidence or imagination. Nora reached across the table, her expression earnest. I was the biggest skeptic, Mrs. Marshall. I thought Jackson was just processing his grief through these signs. but I've experienced too many unexplainable things in this house to deny it anymore. She described waking in the night to find all the architectural drawings laid out in a specific order that made a construction issue clear. The smell of pipe tobacco appearing when they were stuck on a decision. Music from the era when the house was built playing faintly from empty rooms. Last week, Jackson added, I found a note in one of Dad's notebooks that I know wasn't there before. It said, Tell your mother everything. It's time. The handwriting sample he showed me was unmistakably Robert's. The distinctive way he formed his capital T's, the slight rightward slant of his letters. I talked to him. Jackson confessed, his voice breaking slightly. Every day. When I'm working on the house, I ask him questions about the renovation. Sometimes I feel answers coming to me, ideas I wouldn't have had on my own. Sometimes I hear Jackson having full conversations when he thinks I'm not around, Nora added gently. It was odd at first, but now it seems natural. A family photo on the sideboard suddenly felt the frame hitting the hardwood floor with a crack. We all jumped. When Jackson picked it up, the glass had broken in a spiderweb pattern, and a small piece of paper had fallen out from behind the photo. It was a note in Robert's handwriting. When you're all together for the first dinner, remember that secrets divide, but truth heals. I stared at it, my hands shaking. That wasn't planted. You didn't put that there. Both Jackson and Nora shook their heads, looking as shocked as I felt. This is the kind of thing that keeps happening, Jackson said. It's like he knew this moment would come, like he's been guiding us toward it. The room suddenly felt charged with a presence I couldn't see but could somehow sense. The air seemed thicker, warmer despite the earlier chill, and faintly just at the edge of perception, the scent of Robert's pipe tobacco. Oh, I breathed, closing my eyes. For the first time since his death, I felt close to my husband again, not in memories or dreams, but as if he were truly present. Jackson reached for my hand across the table. He's been here all along, Mom, watching over both of us in his own way. But I think he wanted us to find our way back to each other too. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the full significance of what was happening. My son had found a way to maintain his connection to his father, through this house, through completing Robert's final project. And in his grief and fear, he had kept it to himself, unable to share this precious link. I talked to him too, I whispered, admitting what I had never told anyone. At home in the garden, before I fall asleep, I tell him about my day, ask his advice even knowing he can't answer. At least I thought he couldn't. Maybe he's been listening all along, Jackson suggested, his own eyes wet with tears. Maybe that's why he wanted me to bring you here now. The weight of anger I had carried lifted slightly, replaced by wonder and a complex mix of emotions I couldn't fully name. Whatever was happening in this house, whether truly supernatural or simply the powerful presence of Robert's love manifested through his plans and our memories, it had begun to heal the rift between my son and me. As if confirming this thought, the candles on the table suddenly burned brighter for a moment, casting a warm glow over all of us, including the empty chair that somehow no longer felt empty. I decided to spend the night in the house despite my earlier anger. The guest room was nearly finished, with a comfortable bed and a reading lamp positioned exactly how I liked it, another detail from Robert's plans that Jackson had faithfully executed. Unable to sleep, I wandered to what would have been the master bedroom. The renovation here was still in progress, with paint samples on one wall and flooring yet to be installed. I sat on the window seat, looking out at the moonlit garden where my roses would someday grow. Were you ever going to tell me about your heart, Robert? I whispered into the darkness. Or were you going to protect me right until the end? The air in the room seemed to shift and settle around me like an embrace. I continued talking, pouring out my hurt, my loneliness, my anger at being kept in the dark. About his health, about this house, about Jackson's experiences here, and finally my enduring love. I miss you every day. I concluded, exhaustion finally overtaking me. But I think perhaps you already know that. I fell asleep on the window seat, wrapped in a throw blanket, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't dream of Robert. Perhaps because in some inexplicable way he felt close enough that dreams weren't necessary. Morning found me stiff but strangely peaceful. I made my way to the kitchen, following the scent of coffee to find Jackson already there, unshaven and bleary-eyed. Couldn't sleep either, I asked, accepting the mug he offered. Not much, he admitted. Too many things left unsaid. We sat at the small kitchen table, the early light casting long shadows through the windows. The house was quiet, Nora presumably still asleep. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jackson said finally, "for pulling away after Dad died, for keeping this house secret, for not sharing the letter. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself. Seeing your grief was too much on top of my own. And I'm sorry for not recognizing how deeply you were hurting," I replied. I was so consumed by my own loss that I couldn't see past it. "Your father was my husband, but he was your father. Your relationship with him was different, but no less significant." Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope. "There's one more letter. Dad left this with specific instructions that it was to be given to you when the time feels right. I think last night made it clear that the time is now." This letter was shorter than the first, dated even closer to Robert's death. In it, he spoke directly to the possibility that he might not live to present the house to me himself. "If Jackson is giving you this letter," he wrote, "then my heart has betrayed me sooner than I hoped. But know this, my love, the house was never just about bricks and timber. It was about creating a place for new beginnings, a place where our family could continue to grow and gather, even if I cannot be there physically." He went on to express his wish that I would consider making this house my home, carrying forward the life we had planned together even in his absence. "The greatest gift you could give me," he wrote, "would be to find joy again, to create new memories within these walls I chose for you." The letter concluded with words that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. "I have loved you every day of our life together, Velma, and whatever comes after this life, I will love you still. Look for me in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths. I'll be there." When I looked up, Jackson was wiping tears from his face. "I think I'd like to sell the family house," I said softly, "and finish this renovation together, really." Hope brightened his features. "You'd want to live here. It was your father's last gift to me," I said. "To us, really. And perhaps the best way to honor him is to use it as he intended, a place for new beginnings." Over the next 6 months, Jackson, Nora, and I worked side by side to complete Robert's vision for the house. We followed his plans wherever possible, consulting the detailed notes he had left. And yes, occasionally we would find solutions appearing almost magically when we were stuck. A relevant photograph falling from a book, a sample of exactly the right material, turning up in an unexpected place. The unexplainable events continued. Tools rearranged overnight, the scent of tobacco lights turning on in empty rooms. But rather than frightening us, these occurrences became comforting reminders of Robert's continuing presence in our lives. Moving day was emotional, but also liberating. Each item I brought from the old house was chosen with purpose. Things that carried happy memories rather than painful reminders of loss. The rest I donated or gave to friends, releasing the weight of possessions that had begun to feel like anchors to grief. Jackson and Nora's relationship deepened through their shared experience. 6 months after that first revelatory dinner, they held a small wedding ceremony in the backyard. The rose garden Robert had planned for me provided the perfect backdrop, its first blooms opening just in time for the occasion. During the ceremony, an empty chair was placed in the front row, with Robert's favorite jacket draped over it. When the time came to exchange vows, a single perfect rose petal fell from nowhere onto the jacket, though there was no breeze and the roses were several feet away. I've lived in Robert's final gift for almost a year now. The house has become a home filled with new memories alongside echoes of the past. Amanda visits more often, drawn by the warmth and healing that seems to emanate from the very walls. Jackson and Nora have purchased the house next door, continuing the family closeness Robert always valued. As for the unusual occurrences, they've grown less frequent, but still happen at significant moments. The crystal glass moves occasionally. The scent of tobacco appears when important decisions are being discussed. And sometimes, in the quiet evenings, when I sit in the garden, I feel the unmistakable presence of my husband beside me. Is it truly Robert's spirit, a manifestation of our collective love and grief, perhaps? It doesn't matter. What matters is that through this house, through his final act of love, Robert gave us a way to heal, to reconnect, to move forward while keeping him close. Last night, as I was turning off lights before bed, I caught a glimpse of Robert's reflection in the window glass. Not as he was when illness had begun to take its toll, but vibrant and smiling as he had been in our happiest days. The image lasted only a second before fading, but the sense of peace it left behind remains. Grief, I've learned, doesn't end. It transforms. The love we shared with those we've lost continues to shape us, to guide us. And sometimes, if we're fortunate, it finds ways to manifest in our lives, reminding us that connections of the heart transcend even death itself. The journey through grief is different for everyone, but one truth remains constant. Keeping secrets from those we love only deepens our isolation. When we share our pain, our experiences, our strange encounters with what might be the beyond, we open ourselves to healing together, rather than suffering alone. I still live in the house Robert planned for us. Jackson and Nora have welcomed their first child, a son named Robert, of course. And occasionally, when the family gathers for dinner, we still set that extra place with the crystal glass. Sometimes it moves during the meal, sometimes it remains still, but it's always a reminder that love doesn't end when breath does. Have you ever felt the presence of someone you've lost? A familiar scent, an unexplained sound, a sense of being watched over? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to hear more stories of love that transcends even the greatest separations. Like this video, if you believe that those we lose are never truly gone from our lives, share it with someone who might need to hear that grief can transform into something beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come to us when we least expect them, even from beyond the veil that separates this life from whatever comes next.